So hello again, everyone. My name is Rula Bashour. I am the project manager of Transforming Higher Education project. It's a collaboration between the American University of Beirut, the Global Confederation of Higher Education Association for Agriculture and Life Sciences, GECHERA, Earth University in Costa Rica, the Kellogg Foundation. This collaboration is to transform higher education in selected universities in Mexico and Haiti. Also to advocate for university change globally through the GECHERA network for Higher Education Association in Agriculture and Life Sciences. So this project, together with the Asia Pacific Association of Agricultural Research Institution, APARI, are hosting this webinar today on experiential learning in agriculture education. I would like to welcome all participants from our project partners, the pilot universities, GECHERA associations, APARI members, and all other institutions from all over the world. And also I would like to welcome our speakers from Lebanon, Costa Rica, the US, and Canada. I will be introducing each one of them shortly before they start their presentations. I would also like to welcome Martina Spisiakova from APARI, who will be helping us today with the web moderation. She helped us with the preparation and now with the moderation of this webinar. Just a brief for those of you who do not know about our Transforming Higher Education project. So it basically aims at introducing 5 key elements of success in higher education, namely experiential and participatory learning, community engagement, social entrepreneurship, ethical and value-based leadership, and conflict resolution through dialogue. We will be preparing a series of webinars on each of these key elements of success, and today we will start with experiential learning in agriculture education. So it will be an hour and a half, 90 minutes webinar. We have 4 speakers who will present their talk, and then after that we will have time for questions and comments and discussion. As you may have noticed, as participants, your microphones and videos are turned off, and this is due to the very large number of participants we have. So only we have enabled the speakers and presenters for video and microphones. But as participants, you can use the chat box on the right side of your screen, and you can raise any question or comment you have for the speakers. Martina and I will be compiling the questions and sharing them for discussion. If your question is specific to any of the speakers, please mention their name, and then make sure to address the questions to everyone in the chat box and not individually, because if you send it individually to the speaker, they might miss it. And that's it for introduction. So now it's time to introduce our first speaker, Professor Sauma Boujoude from the American University of Beirut in Lebanon. He will be giving us his talk on theoretical foundation and objectives of experiential learning.
Thank you, Lola. Let me first share my introduction.
I will, one second. Dr. Boujoude.
Introduce me, okay.
Dr. Boujoude graduated from the University of Cincinnati in USA in 1988 with a doctorate in science education. From 88 to 93, he was an assistant professor in Syracuse University in USA. In 93, he joined the American University of Beirut, where he is currently a professor. He held several positions at AUB and is presently the director of Center of Teaching and Learning and an associate dean for the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Boujoude has published in many renowned journals and have written chapters and edited books in English and Arabic. He has been very active presenter at the science education conferences. He served as an associate editor of the Journal of Research in Science and Teaching between 2015 and 2012. And currently he serves at editorial board of several science education journals. Dr. Boujoude, the floor is yours. Please share your presentation. And
thank you very much, Rula. First of all, this is the presentation. Just a second. Let me also, can I stop the video?
Yes,
How can you do that?
second button from
Okay,
the
okay.
bottom.
Now, good afternoon for us, probably good morning for some of you, and good night for others. The title of my presentation, as you notice, is Theoretical Foundations and Objectives of Experiential Learning. Let me say something here is that I'm not in agriculture, I'm in science education, therefore, but I do work in a variety of areas related to science education. Now, during this relatively short presentation, I will discuss the following topics: learning from experience, foundational scholars of experiential learning, definition of experiential learning cycle, and the role of educators in addition to theoretical contributions to experiential learning. Actually, the many researchers suggest that experience is central in the learning process. For example, Cohen and Walker suggest that experience is the foundation of and stimulus for learning, and that learners actively construct their experience. Moreover, learning is influenced by the social cultural context in which it happens. Now, this is, I think, one of the most important foundational scholars of experiential learning include John Dewey, William James, Jean-Pierre Jay, Kurt Lewin, especially Kurt Lewin, Lev Vygotsky, and others. I'm going to focus on the work of John Dewey because he's one of the most important people who advocated experience who has influenced the development of experiential learning. Now, Dewey, who relatively lived in the early 20th century, emphasized the role of experience in learning. While acknowledging the importance of experiential learning, Dewey emphasized that we do not learn from experience only, but from reflecting on experience. And in addition, he asserted that learning is an active, constructive, and continuous process that involves learning to think through the application of real problems. Now, Dewey contains, however, according to him, people learn experientially. However, there are some educated and some miseducative situations. Good educative experiences motivate, encourage, and enable students to go on to have more valuable learning experiences, whereas poor, miseducative experiences tend to lead towards a student closing off from potential positive experience in the future. So selecting the activity is very important. Now, what is the definition of experiential learning? Now, Kolb developed the theory of experiential learning based on the work of Dewey and many others. As I said, the names were mentioned before. Because of his dependence on many theoretical frameworks, Kolb maintained that experiential learning theory is eclectic, yet it pulls from many other theories. Moreover, he emphasized that knowledge is obtained by understanding, transforming, and reflecting on experience. He emphasized that the experiential learning theory refers to the process of acquiring knowledge as a dynamic cycle composed of four modes of learning, which are experiencing, reflecting, thinking, and active in a recursive manner. Recursive means involves the repeated application of a rule, definition, or procedure to successive results. Now, the Kolb's ideas regarding experiential learning was presented in his book entitled Experiential Learning, Experience as the source of learning and development, which was first published in 1984 and appeared in 2014 in a second edition. In this book, Kolb suggested that experiential learning is a four-stage process during which learners are asked to engage themselves in a new experience, actively reflect on that experience, conceptualize that experience, and integrate it with past experiences. Now, what the Kolb is known for is his experiential learning theory. The experiential learning theory or the experiential learning cycle is made out of four stages. The concrete experience, where a new experience or situation is encountered or existing experience is reinterpreted. Then you have reflective observation on the new experience, which is of particular importance in this stage are any inconsistencies between experience and understanding. This creates some discrepancy. Then you have the abstract conceptualization, which requires reflection, which produces a new idea or a modification of an existing abstract concept. This means that the person has learned from experience. And finally, active experimentation, which is learners apply their new idea to the world around them to test what happens. Now, I have another arrow that goes out because this is a continuous process. It does not stop at a stage, and it's like cyclical and sometimes hierarchical. It goes up from one stage to another or one level to another. Now, as I said, we have concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, active interpretation. Now, according to Kolb, effective learning happens when individuals are actively and progressively involved in the four stages of the process with the help of a teacher or a facilitator who plays different roles at different stages of this cycle. Sometimes the teacher plays the role of a facilitator, other times as subject expert, other times as standard setter and evaluator, and more often as a coach. Kolb views learning as an integrated process with each stage mutually supportive of and feeding of the next stage. Now, those are the roles of the educators that I spoke about. I'm not going to put a lot of time on them, but if people want to look at them, this is the facilitator, expert subject, standard setter, and coach and evaluator. Now, at this stage, what are a number of the important theoretical contributions to the experiential learning theory? To answer this question, I'm going to look at or answer three different contributions to the theory. There are many other contributions, but those are the three that I thought would be relevant to us. So you have constructivism, learning styles, and other learning theory or the Norse theory. First, constructivism. Constructivists believe that learning is an active process during which students or learners construct their knowledge based on the prior learning. The teacher in this process plays the role of the facilitator who provides experiences to enable students to construct meaning. Remember that Dewey was one of the main people influence Kolb, and he is the person who started the idea of constructivism. Now, the five elements of constructivist teaching are important here. The first one is activating prior knowledge. The second is acquiring knowledge. The third is understanding knowledge. The fourth is using knowledge. And the fifth is reflecting on knowledge. They will be in the second slide. Now, activating prior knowledge, since learning involves relating what one is learning to what one already knows, activating prior knowledge is essential for successful learning. acquiring knowledge. If students are to develop understanding, they need to see the big picture and its related parts. Understanding does not result when content is experienced as isolated bits and facts. And this is the importance of experiential learning, because it puts together all content under an umbrella. You know, this type of learning should not result in sacrificing breadth of knowledge. Understanding knowledge, when we activate prior knowledge and we acquire knowledge, then understanding starts. Then we have using knowledge, providing students with activities that allow knowledge that they have acquired to be used, so it becomes functional. And finally, reflecting on knowledge, because students need to acquire knowledge, understand it, but they also need to reflect it so that they can change. Reflection is a process of change. If you notice, those 5 elements are very related to the Kolb's cycle. Now, the other contributor is the adult learning theory, which is andragony. Now, according to this theory, adult learners uh, the second theoretical contributor to the experiential learning theory is Knowles' adult learning theory, which emphasizes that adults come to the learning environment with rich experiences that can be used to motivate learning. These learners expect to be actively involved in the learning process and be able to apply what they have learned. The reason why I thought this is important for experiential learning is that many of our students in universities can be considered our learners, and therefore we have to think about what we have to offer them so that they can learn better. Now, according to the third theoretical contributor to experiential learning theory, are learning styles. This is an area that Kolb emphasized a lot. According to him, the Kolb's learning theory identifies 4 distinct learning styles, which are based on a 4-stage learning cycle. He explains that different people naturally prefer a certain learning style. Knowing a person's learning style enables learning to be oriented according to the preferred method. However, everyone responds to and needs all types of learning style to some extent. It is a matter of matching the learning style with specific learning situations, and Kolb really matches the learning styles with the stages of the learning cycle. Now, those are the 4 learning styles: diverging style people, assimilating learning preference, converging learning style, and accommodating learning style. Now, in summary, because there are a lot of misconceptions about experiential learning. That's why I decided to say what experiential learning is not, so that we do not have the misconception. Now, experiential learning is not just learning from life experiences as compared to lecture-based learning. 2, it is not experience in which the learner is directly in touch with realities being studied as compared to only reading, hearing, talking, and writing. It is not learning from daily life, examples as compared to academic knowledge generated and transmitted by experts. The emphasis in the 3 above is on direct sense experiences and in-context learning as the primary sources of learning, while minimizing the role of thinking, reflection, analysis, and academic knowledge. But those 3 that I said are 3 of the misconceptions related to experiential learning. But experiential learning is a 4-part process where learners are asked to engage themselves in new experiences, actively reflect on that experience, and conceptualize that experience and integrate it with past experiences in preparation for action. Now, Well, a few more ideas that I want to say. Educators should ensure that activities in experiential learning are designed and carried out in ways that offer each learner the chance to engage in the method that suits her or him best. Moreover, all individuals can be helped to learn more effectively by identifying their lesser preferred learning style and strengthening it. Ideally, activities and material should be developed in ways that draw on abilities from each stage of the experiential learning cycle and take the students through the whole process in sequence. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boujoudy, for your insightful presentation and the overview you gave us. I would like to remind the participants that if you have any comments or questions for Professor Boujoudy, you can post them in the chat box.
Rula, can I say something? I will share the PowerPoint, not the one that I showed, a PowerPoint as well as notes to the PowerPoint so that it's a little bit more elaborate. And I have a list of references that I think are very good references from which I tried to extract the information in this presentation. So all those are present and will be shared with you. Okay.
Okay, perfect. And we will make them available for everyone. And we are also recording this webinar and we'll make it available for everyone as well as the presentation. So if you have questions for Professor Abu Rawde, please write them in the chat box. And if you joined recently the webinar, please introduce yourself and your institution. Now I would like to invite our second speaker, Professor Daniel Gerard from Earth University in Costa Rica. He will talk to us about implementing experiential education and getting faculty more involved. Professor Daniel Gerard received his master's in international agricultural development from Cal Poly State University and his doctorate in agriculture education from Iowa State University. He's currently the Director of Education for Leadership Initiative at Earth University. From 2005 to 2018, he was the Earth University Provost. And before that, he was the academic dean, and he held numerous academic positions at the institution, including part of the support university team from Cal Poly that collaborated in the foundation of the Earth University. He is currently actively engaged with colleagues from Eastern and Southern African universities on incorporating entrepreneurial and experiential education and community engagement in their curricula. Dr. Gerard is a member of International Advisory Panel of RUFORUM, the Learning Partnership Advisory Committee of the MasterCard Foundation, the advisory board of our project, the Transforming Higher Education Project, and the Costa Rica-US DEP for Nature Supervisory Committee. He's the author of many publications related to agricultural higher education. Professor Gerard, the floor is yours. Please share your presentation and go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Rula, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, depending on where you are. I have to confess, this is the first time I'm presenting in a webinar. And just to note that the topic of this webinar on experiential education, it's somewhat ironic that we are doing it in this form when we're basically all talking at you and not having a particularly participatory experience. But I hope that all of you who have questions and even more so comments are please get active on the chat. Rula and Martina are going to be monitoring that so we can have some good participation as well as having our presentations. I want to talk about the implementation.
Please, Daniel, could you please share your screen?
I thought I was, Rula, just a second. Got it? You have it now?
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So what I want to talk about in particular is the implementation of experiential education, particularly on getting the faculty in our colleges and universities of agriculture involved in experiential education. So, but before I do that, I wanted to talk just briefly about sort of the why of this. Why are we concerned about increasing and improving student outcomes? I think that we can all agree that today we are facing challenges that are in many ways unprecedented. From climate change to the issues of providing healthy food for an increasing population, and including as well the current crisis that we're all facing with the coronavirus. And I think what we need to talk about is what kind of an agricultural professional are we looking for the future? And I just want to concentrate on a few, just for a second, on some of the characteristics of that professional for this century. And I want to talk about, I think we need to emphasize the role of leadership. These are going to be the future leaders of our countries. They're going to be the future leaders of our agricultural systems, of our food systems. And we need professionals who have solid leadership skills and competencies. Values and ethics is something that we rarely talk about in universities and colleges, particularly colleges, technical colleges, agricultural colleges, and similar institutions. But actually, I think that we could agree that the inculcation, that the preparation of leaders with strong positive values and ethics is extremely important. The professionals that we're currently training and preparing for future roles have to be excellent communicators. Teamwork is clearly essential. Rarely do things happen because of individuals. They happen because of teams. In this day and age of the internet, of incredibly voluminous material information that's available to everybody, it's increasingly important that students and graduates are autonomous learners. And an important feature of autonomous learning is critical thinking. So people are able to sift through all of that information. The sixth feature or characteristic of the agricultural professionals for the future that I have here is solid technical and scientific knowledge. Now, typically this would be number one. This is what we do in colleges and universities, is provide students with technical and scientific knowledge. I put it number 6 to emphasize that these other things, which are frequently referred to as soft skills, and other ways of referring to this sort of these sort of characteristics, are equally important to the acquisition and the transfer of technical and scientific knowledge. Management skills are going to be increasingly important for our graduates. And again, and very related to the issue of values and ethics, I think we need to talk about the importance of our graduates, our students having, and ourselves as well, having a solid commitment to social welfare, social development, and environmental conservation. Okay, so how do we prepare leaders with this profile? It involves a great deal more than simply transferring information. I think Dr. Salma provided an extremely comprehensive, short but comprehensive introduction to what is experiential education and what it differs from perhaps more traditional forms of education. Our professionals that we are currently preparing need far more than just information. They require a host of competencies that are acquired through experience. And as Dr. Salma said, it's not just experience, it's the reflection upon that experience. It's applying that reflection to knowledge that they already have and to create new knowledge. Information is much more accessible today. And most of our students are skilled in information technologies. Even the poorest resource students have access, in many cases, to smartphones. They have access to, if not a computer, they have access to an internet cafe where they can access the incredible amount of information that's available. However, in many ways, many of our institutions continue in practices that are really mired in the past. And I just want to briefly, and I think, again, Dr. Salma provided a very good introduction to the whole issue of experiential education. But Paulo Freire, an important figure in the educational field, referred to the more traditional lecture-based instruction as the banking model, in which students basically are just provided with information which they're expected to store away. And then their primary duty is to simply memorize, remember this information, and then accurately recall the information provided by the instructor. Obviously, this is not the case in all institutions by any means. It's much more common to find a mix of methodologies, but nevertheless, the banking model in many cases seems to prevail. On the other hand, experiential education or experiential learning and active participatory learning is very distinct from the banking model. It seeks to unite theory and practice to shift the focus to learning. So the focus shifts from the professor as the dispenser of knowledge to the student as the center of, as the focus of learning. I think that we could all agree that education in agriculture is particularly well suited to an experiential approach. Nevertheless, we continue to focus much of our activity on lecture-based instruction. I want to make clear, and I think that Professor Salma did this as well. This is not an issue of banishing lecture-based instruction. That can be an important tool in learning, but often it's overemphasized at the expense of the acquisition of critical competencies. So basically, from a banking model to a participatory model, and an experiential learning model, I would like to suggest that the faculty play the most critical role in this transition. So how do we get faculty on board with experiential learning? I think the most critical step is to provide institutional leadership clearly articulates that this transition is not just a priority, but it is in fact a requirement. And if we are going to fulfill the promise of preparing the next generation of leaders, we have to, those of us who are in positions of leadership in universities, have to make it clear that our institutions are shifting from a banking model of education, however you want to describe it, to a more participatory sort of experience with experiential learning taking center stage. Now, clearly for faculty to get on board, for faculty to begin this transition, they must be convinced, they must share a philosophical commitment to new ways of facilitating learning. Now, I think when I talk to faculty members in diverse institutions, often the first things that come up are, well, what are the challenges to doing this? And some of the most common ones that people mention, how do you manage experiential and participatory learning in large classes? And I think that some of the next presentations are going to deal more specifically with this issue. Others cite the lack of resources. Do they have access to a college farm where students can actually engage in agricultural practices and do applied research and many other things? Access to communities. Can students go out and work with farmers, with community groups? Finally, or not finally, there are a number of other challenges, but often mentioned is that this sort of learning environment and experiential learning requires a great deal more of teachers' time and creativity than simply lecturing. There's a quote from Kolb, mentioned in the previous presentation. One can develop a state-of-the-art learning-focused curriculum that's doomed to failure if faculty members are not on board with it, both philosophically and technically. So some of the things that we can do in addition to helping faculty become philosophically and technically competent in this area is provide faculty members with research. There's a tremendous amount of research, some of which was presented in the previous presentation, that demonstrates the effectiveness of well-designed experiential learning activities. We can provide professional development opportunities for key faculty members to visit other institutions, to sit in on classes, to sit in on courses that require active participation by students, to go to conferences particularly on this subject, to learn more about experiential learning. I think that one of the things that comes up frequently as an impediment to implementing experiential learning, active learning, participatory learning in our schools and colleges and universities is the whole issue of faculty evaluation and promotion. If the primary focus of faculty promotion and faculty evaluation is publishing, then what is the incentive for faculty members to become experts in experiential learning? So I think we need to review the criteria used for evaluation and remove obstacles that prevent the implementation of experiential learning activities. Too much emphasis on administrative tasks, perhaps, and as I mentioned, research publication, and a lack of emphasis on effective teaching. Shouldn't the student evaluations of courses count as least as much as a professor's history of publication? Some additional things I think that can help faculty get on board and encourage faculty to become promoters of this sort of approach to education is actually engaging the faculty in planning and oversight of an experiential learning agenda. It's not enough to simply tell the faculty we are going to convert or transition to a more experiential learning system in our colleges. We have to get them involved in planning it and providing oversight of such an agenda. I think the development of clear learning goals, and I want to emphasize for both the overall program, not just individual courses, is also a key measure that can be taken. Obviously, we need some type of quality control of experiential education. It's an art, it's a science, and we need to control the way it's implemented. I think another one, and there are clearly many others that can be implemented, but is developing communities of practice. Faculty can help each other become more effective teachers, more effective facilitators of learning. They are in the best position to do so. A caveat that all of these require considerable time and effort. And I think many of our experiences at Earth University, the experiences that the pilot universities currently are undergoing in Haiti and Mexico demonstrate clearly that this is not a simple process. This is a process that requires incredible commitment, incredible amounts of time and effort. But I think the message is that it's clearly worth it in terms of improving student outcomes and helping us to prepare the leaders that we need for the future. Finally, like Dr. Salma in the previous presentation, I just wanted to share a few resources that I think would be useful for those who want to to learn a little bit more about this, to study a little bit more. So, with that, I'd like to finish and thank everybody for your attention and for sharing with me my first opportunity as a presenter in a webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sherard, for for triggering our thinking, I would say, and on how to get involved as faculty members. I didn't know that was your first webinar, so definitely experiential learning wasn't really virtual, but we have to adapt. So thank you for your presentation. I would like to remind all participants that they can send their questions in the chat box for Professor Sherard or any of the participants. Now I would like to present our next speaker, Professor Michel Watteau from University of Wisconsin-Madison in USA. He will talk to us about experiential learning in classrooms, learn to discuss and discuss to learn. Professor Watteau grew up on a dairy farm in Belgium. He was first generation college student in his family. He came to the US in 1985 and completed his PhD in ruminant nutrition at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. After 10 years of international dairy extension work, he took a faculty position at the Department of Dairy Science at the University of Wisconsin, where he remains to date. He has received numerous teaching awards, not only from his university, but also from the state of Wisconsin, from professional societies, such as the American Dairy Science Association, the North American College of and Teachers of Agriculture, the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA. He has gained international reputation as an educator because of his dedication and passion to empower students through critical thinking. Professor Watteau is a trilingual. He has published technical dairy guides and that has been translated to 8 languages and have been distributed in more than 80 countries. He was authored peer-reviewed papers, books, and chapters on teaching and learning, and he currently teaches 4 courses, including a 2-week field program in Mexico and a course for a PhD candidates interested in exploring effective teaching in internationally diverse college classrooms. Thank you, Professor Watteau, for being with us, and please go ahead.
Well, thank you for the introduction. I hope everyone can hear me and see the presentation. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. So, very well. So again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. So my responsibility in the next 15 minutes is to challenge you to think about how experiential learning can actually take place within the classroom. So my presentation is learning to discuss and discuss to learn. So, oops, let's see now. Sharing the PowerPoint. Sorry. Save the technical difficulties here. My PowerPoint is not moving forward. Oh, here we go. Can you see the next slide?
Yes.
So I'm from Madison, Wisconsin, which is a university town, north central part of the United States, and this is where you hear me from. So the first question I want to ask and make you think about is, can experiential learning occur in a classroom? So what is experiential learning? Dr. Suma has done a fantastic job of explaining it. And I want to ask you the question here. Now, is a farm visit an experiential learning? Well, the short answer is maybe yes, maybe no. It depends. It depends how it is organized, how it is conceived, how it is implemented. So what is experiential learning? Clearly, Kolb's, as Dr. Suma explained in the first presentation, gives us an insight into what it takes for learning to occur. Learning occurs when the learner has some sort of concrete experience of the world. The learner needs to be able to do some abstractions. The learner needs to be active and the learner also needs to be reflective. The learner needs to have experiences, being able to engage in observation, conceptualize, and then experiment. Those are the four parts of learning that Dr. Suma explained really well to us earlier. So can these things happen in the classroom? And I'm hoping that in the next 12 minutes, I convince you that it can, to a certain degree. So what are the role of the learner in the called experiential learning cycle? They need to get motivated. We all know the importance of the affective domain. If you don't care, you don't learn. So you need to be motivated, the desire to learn, the desire to change the world, change oneself, change what's going on. There is then the idea of building mental model of the problem. Why isn't the world the way it's supposed to be? What needs to be changed? What do we know around about the current issue that needs to be changed? Then there is the making prediction and generate options. And finally, there is the experimentation and the practice of the skills that then lead to this closing of the circle, which actually become a spiral, as Dr. Somewhere again explained to us. Now, what do the instructor do for facilitating the learner to learn? As again, Dr. Suma explained, we need to play multiple roles. The first one would be facilitator to get student motivated, content expert to make sure the student have the proper mental model, standard setter to make sure that they don't do simple prediction but well-grounded work, and then coach to help them improve their skills as they go around and experimenting with the new knowledge. So I'm going to focus now on in-class discussion as a mode of experiential learning in the classroom. And what do we mean by in-class discussion? Well, first, let me tell you what discussion is not. Discussion is not just lecturing without a PowerPoint presentation. It's not asking questions to students as a way to break up a PowerPoint presentation. And it's not ending a class with a time for question and answer. So I cannot emphasize enough that in-class discussion is not answering questions or asking questions during a lecture. So what is a class discussion? So here's my own definition. A class discussion starts with having students exposed to and prepared for a predefined set of educational materials. That's your job to give it to them ahead of time. An in-class discussion then is a pre-planned activity that engages students in, guess what? The phase of the cold cycle of learning, exercising critical thinking skills, analyzing, synthesizing, evaluating claims, generating new ideas, relevant questions and hypotheses, exploring their thoughts and their own belief, do some metacognition, practicing communication skill, the basic aspect of being able to listen, active listening, talking when you need to talk, have to talk, and writing, taking notes are very important skills to acquire. Learning to collaborate, work in goal-oriented teams, co-generate ideas, provide constructive feedback to one another, a very important skill, not just in the classroom, but in life, professional life, personal life. So how do you design classroom and what are the different types of in-class discussions? This is a slide where we're going to look at lecture-based course and discussion-based course, what the instructor do and what the student do before a lecture, during a lecture, and after a lecture. In the traditional, I'm calling it, the 20th century education, you as an instructor spend hours and hours and hours to prepare a PowerPoint that's going to be the perfect PowerPoint. Who would not understand all this work that you put into? It's so clear by now because you spend so much time preparing it that you're going to go then and spread it out to your students who are sitting in rows in front of you in the classroom, right? And then students forget what you just said until they have to study for the exam, which may happen, a few weeks or maybe even a few months later. There's not much interaction left to right. It's just from the top down. Now let's look at the discussion here, which is a simplification of the model that I try to use in the design of my own classes, where the students start with reading material or viewing material on the internet, or doing something concrete, and then they write about it, or they answer a quiz about it before class. And I access that information, and this is what helped me plan my in-class discussion with my student, taking into account the way they reacted to the reading that I had them made before class. Then in class, we have different types of discussion activities, and I'll talk about them in a moment. And then again, after class, you need to have follow-up interaction between you and your student. So you see, like in this model, the arrows go not only left to, up and down, but also left to right and right to left. So those interactions are very important in designing experiential learning experiences for your student. One last detail about this slide. Notice who prepares and who makes the PowerPoint presentation. In the lecture base, top left, you, the instructor, before class. In my classes, it's at the bottom right of the slides. It's my students who are preparing the presentation and make it to the rest of the class to demonstrate their learning in the class. So quickly, my own Michel Watio's, years of trying to do this, my principle in designing successful classroom. So you need to think about what you expect your student to do before class. So they need to complete a reading assignment that will frame the discussion. Students need to be graded for online quiz or posting before class. They take the quiz before class as a reward for preparing for doing the reading. During the class, you start with an activity that put everyone on the same page, make them feel comfortable so that they can actually go beyond their comfort zone. You need to start where they're comfortable before you can take them out of their comfort zone. And then you engage them in a discussion, individually, small group, or the entire class. And we'll talk about this in a moment. And then you end your discussion with a so what, a reflection that helps everyone see how the direction went, the discussion went, the implications, the take-home messages. And then hopefully you have a follow-up. Again, in some class it works well, in other class it works less well to have students writing a follow-up reflection as a post on a web page or a journal entry that is graded as well. And then students prepare for the next class. So this is my steps for how to prepare and design a discussion class. So what are the in-class types of discussion? There are many types of discussions, and each discussion has its own strengths and weaknesses that suit it depending on the objective that you have for the discussion you want to engage your student in. Think, right? Pair share is probably one that you're the most common, one of the first one that you probably will be introduced to when you try to get students to be engaging with one another. It helps students reflect on what is right, what is wrong, why is it true, why is it false. So my little icons here, the S represents students and the arrow are, the interaction as pairs of students working together. A second type of discussion is the Socratic seminar, where we are all kind of in a circle, a square, whatever shape or form, but everyone kind of face each other. And it's an open-ended journey into a topic, to always asking the question, yes, but why? So what? So that we go in depth into a topic. The third type of discussion is what's called the jigsaw discussion, which is pretty well suited when you try to cover a lot of materials. And that's very important here for you to remember. It's not because you are doing a discussions that you have to sacrifice covering content. Students can cover their own content by doing the pre-class assignment. So here's a fourth type of discussion, a clear, straightforward debate. That's self-evident what you're doing here. It's really confrontational, one argument versus another argument. Structured academic controversy helps students evaluate controversial or paradoxical claims or perspective from various stakeholders. You assign a scientific topic, say GMOs, genetically modified organism, and group one look at GMO from a consumer's perspective, group two look at GMO from a producer perspective, group three looks at GMO from a public health perspective, for example. And a sixth example of a type of discussion is the last word, where students this is a discussion that's very well suited to help students practice their listening skills, as it involves retelling the ideas that others have expressed just before you tell them again, but giving the initial owner of the idea one last word when they go around talking and listening with one another. So, two examples of two classes that I've taught this past spring. The first class is Food Production System and Sustainability. It's a course where obviously we're looking at food, how it's being produced, and the social, environmental, and economic, the three pillars of sustainability associated with the food production systems at different scales, local, national, field, and different system boundaries, very local to global. So the students in the class are primarily seniors. Our students are part-time workers at the university here in Madison. They come from suburban areas, a few from farms, but it's a minority, as you can see on the slides. And their parents have high school and bachelor's degree primarily. So very few of them have advanced degree, parents with advanced degree. That understanding of the socioeconomic diversity of the student is very important to keep in mind when you're trying to engage them into the classroom activities. So at the end of the semester, after we've done the type of activities that I just described earlier, we asked the student in the survey that they learn in the class because of the pre-class quizzes or the individual readings they did before class, the in-class discussion proper, or in the collaborative teams project that they did after the class towards the end of the semester. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1, 2 being not at all, and 10 being a great deal. So the mean value with the 26 students in the class, as you can see, is fairly high. But as you can notice, the student perceived that in-class discussion was really the one thing that I was asking them that was the most conducive to their learning. And I use the standard deviation of those means as a way to look at the consensus. Are they all in agreement with this, or are they a very diverse view in the classroom? So low standard deviation means high consensus. And again, you see that there is a high consensus about the fact that in-class discussion helped students learn. Here is the qualitative data. So written comment from the student at the end of the semester. Analyzing scenario with multiple perspectives in mind is what the class helped me learn. How to critically look at the finding of scientific studies, work with the team, communicating and listening in group discussion is another example of what students said they learned during the class. Here's the second example, just a couple more minutes and we'll be done here. So it's a course called Animal Agriculture and Sustainable Development. We look at the role of livestock in contributing to achieving the Sustainable Development Goal of the United Nations. And so here again, the class is primarily seniors, part-time workers, a little more farm background students take this class. And for all of them, for the vast majority of them, animal was an important part of their life as they were growing up. So again, this background is important for you to keep in mind as you design your classroom activities. Again, the same type of questions, and you'll see that, again, the same type of results. Very good reception of the in-class discussions with a very high consensus. So one more thing about this class is I'm sure you're very familiar with the Bloom's taxonomy of learning, knowledge, understanding, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. And we asked the student in this class if they've learned scientific facts and understanding those facts, and if they've learned to evaluate, analyze, and synthesize. And you'll see that basically for both items, the score is very high, 8.2. And this to me is the student telling me, and this is a very important point here, that there's not a sacrifice. It's not an either or, you know, lecturing to your student to give them the facts or help them to being able to analyze and synthesize. Both can happen in the same time in the classroom. So again, what they said at the end of the semester in their written comments, the course helped me gain knowledge through the discussion sessions. We definitely learned the facts, but there was a lot of emphasis on critical thinking too. We read scientific papers because I do use primary literature, peer review publication. That's the content of the course. So we read scientific paper. By the end of the semester, I felt very confident doing so. And we even learned how to interpret graphs. Can you believe that? So, summary, in-class discussion can bring experiential learning in the classroom. In-class discussion emphasizes your role as facilitator, content expert, standard setter, and learning coach. Students perceive in-class discussion as contributing substantially to their learning, including higher level of learning and other useful skills for later in life. And planning and implementing and facilitating in-class discussion is not trivial. I'm sure I'm making it look good in this presentation, but there was a lot of sweat and trial and error that took place over the years in order to feel comfortable and to make students feel comfortable in participating in class discussion. And with that, I really appreciate your
Thank you, Professor Wacho, for your insightful presentation, and you kind of made us think differently about our classrooms and our classes. So again, if you have any questions, many of you are already sending many questions to Professor Wacho and to the other speakers. Please do so in the chat box. Thank you again, Dr. Michel. Now we're going to move to the last presentation, and our next speaker is Professor Frank Robinson from the University of Alberta in Canada. He will be sharing his experiences in inquiry-based learning in animal agriculture. Dr. Robinson has been a professor of poultry production and physiology at the University of Alberta since 1986. He has a BS from the University of Saskatchewan and an MS in poultry science from Virginia Tech. And he has a PhD in animal reproduction from the University of Guelph. For over 20 years, he was very active in researching reproductive efficiency of female broiler breeders. He has taught in the area of poultry science and general animal agriculture with emphasis on inquiry-based learning. He continues to teach involving experiential learning in an introductory course in animal science, and he has taught over 40 years. He was inducted into Alberta Agriculture Hall of Fame in 2006, and he's a 3M National Teaching Fellow. Professor Robinson, please share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rula. Good morning, everyone. So I have a very few minutes to talk to you about some things that I've worked on for the last several years. And just in contrast to the last presentation, I want to mention that everything I'm going to talk about happens in the lab section of the class. And we do have lectures that are pretty much your standard lecture format. So my main objective for the presentation today is to have each one of you think about where you could fit in small or large opportunities for experiential learning. Lots of times we get, think these are kind of daunting tasks, but I'd really encourage you to think about implementing some small things first, and because small projects can still be quite engaging. So as Rula said, I've taught or co-taught our introductory animal science class over 45 times. And we have currently about 120 students. And these are the kind of things that I try and do in that class. So first of all, I want to really focus on building community. So I call it warming up the first year, because these students take a lot of the basic science courses.
Frank, sorry to interrupt you. Can you please share your screen, because we cannot see your presentation? Sorry to interrupt. Okay, we can see it now.
Sorry about that.
No
I
worries.
thought I had. Anyway, so I'll start over again. So what I was thinking of, what I try and do in this class is to really build community, focus on awareness, not just education. So a lot of times it's the context of things that are just as important as it is the content. I try and get students to focus on inquiry, and so they become the expert on things. And I definitely encourage creativity. We always have some aspect of oral and written communication work, which is often a reflection of what they've done. And we typically try and involve group work if we can. So I want to show you 4 examples today. I wish I had more time because I'd like to show you 4 other ones besides that, but we'll go through each of these one by one pretty quickly. So the first project I want to talk about, and probably the simplest thing we've ever done, is something we call Name That Tool. And what we do here is to try and broaden students' horizon. So by giving them a tool that used in animal agriculture they're not familiar with, have them research it and become the expert, and then present that, they learn a lot about the tool, and a lot of lateral learning actually happens. So we have about 80 items that we have that we gift wrap. And these are some of the examples of things we use. So we might have sheep shears or cow anti-kick devices or U-spoons or chicken toys or all kinds of things. And we gift wrap these. But now that the class is so large, we actually have gone to using photographs. So we go online and find photographs of tools and assign those to the students, and it works just as well. So what we have the students do is to present a single slide poster about what their tool is. So, you know, it may be the most obscure thing, like a chicken nipple drinker, but it can generate considerable discussion. So we have them also talk about what it is, what it's used for, what the consequences of not using it, and alternatives they could use instead. So they have about 5 minutes to do this presentation, and we get a lot of questions from other students. And they, like I said, they become the expert. We've also expanded this now into a group project called Name That Technology, where they're much bigger issues. So for example, we could have rotary milking systems, we could have gestation crates, we could have automatic ventilation system, and so on. This is really popular as it doesn't really require a lot of equipment, or we don't have to spend any money. We can just have the students research these technologies and present them back. And this has actually worked out really, really well. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is something that a program that we ran for 21 terms. And it's called There's a Heifer in Your Tank. But the most important thing is the tagline. And the tagline is answers to questions you didn't know you had about animal agriculture. So in this case, it's based on students picking a quirky question, researching it, becoming the expert, and presenting that back to a large population of people. And we've had over 1,200 students carry out this project. What we do is we randomly form students into groups of 2 to 6, depending on the class size. And excuse me, students were instructed to answer the question in a 3.5-minute presentation. And we also said, be creative. And we'll talk later on about what that involved. And then we held a public forum with about 300 to 700 people. And we would sometimes tour around the province, going to rural areas. And this was kind of like an evening presentation, which involved a lot of community. So the questions were quirky. And I do believe that when you're quirky, you can also get students to be more engaged and even maybe find the humor in things. So we called it There's a Heifer in Your Tank because one of the very first questions I came up with was, if your car burned methane, how far could you travel on the methane from one cow in a day? So we had students research this, and I subtitled this, There's a Heifer in Your Tank, and this is what the program became known as. Another sample question was, why do cattle eat their placenta? Do they like to eat the taste, or is it peer pressure? Or do double yolks eggs arise when hens are mated twice per day? And I've actually had people ask me that question. So we have a bank of several hundred questions we've used, and we don't reuse them. But the point is, we allow students to have fun with these questions as well. So this is the picture of where we encourage creativity, where the 3 or 5.5 minute presentations often came to involve drama in front of a large audience. So the way these evolved was we started off with PowerPoint and expected to be PowerPoint presentations in a scientific format. I never considered humor. So, but eventually after the first one, they developed humor, and then they became original drama productions, and they evolved into YouTube videos, documentaries, and music videos. And if you go on the internet and you Google Heifer in Your Tank, University of Alberta, you will see a lot of YouTube videos students have done over the years. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is something we call a rural cafe. This is really speed dating students with farmers. So this is something that we have run for about 300 students. And what my issue was that students could take our agriculture programs and sometimes never have very much dialogue with real farmers. So I thought, let them ask farmers real questions and have some kind of conversation arise. So what we did was we hosted these events at the university once or in rural communities twice. So it invites 6 or more farmers to come, and sometimes the farmers brought their spouse and kids and parents and so on. And then we set up so that the students would rotate through the groups. So each farmer sat at a table with chairs for 6 students, and we gave them 25 minutes. And we usually had a seated question such as, what makes or breaks your operation, or what keeps you up at night? And then students would discuss this question with the farmers, and then prepare a written report on what the answers were. So that one there worked pretty well, but we moved on to something else. So that's something, the last one I want to talk about is called the game of farm life. And this one kind of evolved from students not having a good understanding of what it takes to become a farmer. Just like in the previous presentation, most of our students are urban. We right now have about 15% of our students actually have farm experience. So for 3 terms, we ran this, and it's really a simulation game. It doesn't cost you anything, and it gets students thinking about what it costs to start up a farm and to get a 1-year operating budget. So what I do is I put students in groups of about 8 to 12, and I gave each one of them $10 million. So these were fake money, obviously. But the mission with the project was to develop a farm. They had to buy land, build barns, perhaps buy quota for supply and managed commodities, buy breeding stock, insurance, and so on. The key thing was each student had a unique position on the team, and they had to write their job description. So whether they were the nutritionist, the veterinarian, the animal breeder, or the farm manager, they had a very specific job description, which we approved. The students then we paired them up with farmers. So the farmers served as their contact experts, and they would help the students answer questions. And these were done in person or online. So the students then presented their farms to the public, and we held these on campus or on rural communities. And they did 2 things. They did a poster about what their farm looked like. And we also asked them to either do a two-dimensional or a 3-dimensional model of their farm so that the public could actually see what happened. And the thing I want to say is students took this really, really seriously. And so the one downside is they probably spent more time on it than it was worth. So some students made, like I said, cardboard construction 3D models. And we actually had some students that printed a turkey barn on a 3D model printer. So that, like I said, the engagement was very high, and it worked out pretty well. We also had students that used commercial software and developed barns with, you could walk through these things on a 3D picture. And so it went pretty well. So I'm out of time, but I hope this gives you some idea of some of the things you could do. The other thing I'll mention that we're doing now that I haven't got slides to show you is We are placing students on farms for 3 days during our spring break and fall break. And we right now have placed almost 300 students. And so this is where students actually go and get their hands and feet dirty on farms and then write a reflection paper on that as well. So if I had more time, we'd talk about more things, but I'm out of time, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Robertson, and also thank you for all our speakers. This was really very insightful, and I guess we have all learned a lot today. I want to say to all participants, you've been asking a lot of questions, so please go ahead and continue sending your comments and questions. We will start now with the questions. I will hand it over to Martina to start asking the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Raula. So on behalf of the participants, I would like to thank all the speakers for very interesting presentations. And indeed, there have been many questions and comments. And I would like to start with two questions for Professor Sauma. So these questions are, what are possible disadvantages of experiential learning, if any? And how a student's inherent capacity can be a limiting factor? So I would like to ask Professor Sauma to respond.
Understand the second question. Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah. How a student's inherent capacity can be a limited factor in experiential learning?
First of all, of course, one of the disadvantages could be of experiential learning. I don't think there are a lot of disadvantages because actually, if you think about the theoretical framework on which it is built, it's how people learn. Actually, we learn from experience and so on. But it could be problematic when the experiences in which the students participate are, as I said, miseducative. Not all experiences given to the students result in good reflection and learning from reflection and so on. And as I said, another problem with experiential learning is that many people have misconceptions of what it is. Many people think that it is just working with concrete things, like just playing around with concrete things will create learning. And this happens a lot in classrooms. This is a misconception. I think the idea is that it is the experiential learning is a whole process. I think also one of the possible disadvantages, if there is, and I keep saying if there is any because I don't think there is many misconceptions, is the context in which the student lives. Sometimes students who live in places where they cannot have concrete experiences, and I mean concrete experiences, I think it will not work. But they can, as Professor Mehmet said, they can really create ways by which students can have the experience. I still don't understand the second question, actually.
Okay.
Can you type it in the chat, please?
Yeah.
I think it's related to the inherent capacity of students. If students are used to different type of learning, if this could be
inherent capacity. You know, okay, now I understand inherent capacity. Actually, it's also related to the design of experiential learning. As I said in my presentation, you know, there are Kolb at least focuses a lot on learning styles, and he says that you know you don't take the what the student is strong on and build on it only. You take the weakest point and build it so that they develop all the learning styles. So one of the issues is to identify what are the problems that the students are facing and working accordingly. And starting from students' needs rather than from the teachers or the content matter needs. So what are the needs of the students? What are the characteristics of the students? And you know, if you remember, I said when we were talking about constructivism, establish prior learning and build on prior learning, or give students enough prior learning so that they can build on it. And prior learning could be different for different people, and therefore if you identify it and build on it, then it becomes I think a successful experience.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sauma. I have here a question to Dr. Daniel. How about the information overdose these days? Is it not hampering the critical thinking capacity? How do we overcome the issue and be a good leader? So the information overdose, and how does it affect the critical thinking?
That's a great question. I mean, I think particularly right now, as many of us have been in various stages of lockdown and spending even more time on the internet, the issue of information overload is a very real one. I think for our students, the ability to sift through the incredible amount of information that one encounters on the internet and other places is probably right up there with the most important skills we can impart on students. And I think some of the techniques and ideas that were presented in other presentations this morning on helping students distinguish between useful information or good information, in quotes, good information and bad information is really incredibly important. And I think there's many participatory exercises in which students can hone those skills. So, I think all of us have to think carefully about how do we help our students become more critical thinkers, and how do we, help them sift through all that information. We're not going to, the object would never be, I don't think, to limit the information that people have available to them, but rather to how to filter it. And this, in this day and age, I'm from the United States, and this issue of fake news is a big issue right now. And how do you help students determine what is fake news and what is not fake news? What is a fact and what is not a fact? These are really incredibly important issues. So I thanks for the question, and I wish I had a much better answer to share.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay, I want to ask you also, what do you think about changing the mind of the new generation in agriculture, and what are maybe motivation and solutions for this issue? Because it seems choosing agriculture as a major is also a challenge for next generation, which I doubt personally, especially now with these days. But if you have an answer for this.
I think another great question, and I think all of us who have been involved in agriculture and agricultural education in particular are aware of the challenges of convincing the next generation that agriculture is perhaps right there among the most important fields that young people can get involved in. I've done a lot of work in Latin America and Africa and in the US as well. In response, when you talk to secondary school students or young people in general, that agriculture is for the less intelligent students, agriculture is for the less motivated, agriculture is just sort of at the bottom of the scale of what students are desiring to do. And I think, our task is to provide examples of agriculture being actually in the forefront. If we think about, for example, young people are incredibly interested in environmental issues. Well, in fact, agriculturalists are the prime stewards of the land. And how can we change agriculture to become an environmental enhancing activity as opposed to an environmental destructive activity. And I think that's a way to get students interested. We talk a lot about, I've heard this expression many times among agricultural educationalists, is how do we make agriculture sexy? And it's perhaps a somewhat trivial trivial description, but I think it's true. How do we make agriculture exciting? It's about science. It's about research. It's about the environment. It's about society. Agriculture is essentially a human activity. So if we're interested in improving the lives of our citizens, if we're interested in improving the lives of rural people and others as well, agriculture is a great way to get involved in that. So I think we have to be very creative about how do we share with young people the excitement and the potential of agriculture. And just the only other thing I would say is I think we have to provide actual experiences for young people. So we need to be in the high schools, in secondary schools, with examples of what agriculture is all about. Because most people, when you go to Africa and you talk to young people in rural areas, they say, I don't want to spend my life digging. And for them, agriculture is about digging with a hoe in a field. And we all, I know that it's far more than that, but we have to demonstrate that. So again, thank you. That's a really good question.
Thank you, Daniel. I will move to the question to Michelle. So Michelle, there's a question about the model you presented. So it's very good, but can it be a routine classroom? Because sometimes they are asking if they are time bound in the class and they have to complete the course in some due time. So how would they manage this? Can it be applicable in routine classrooms? And also another question is, how would that work in very large classrooms?
Sure. So to the first question, this is one aspect that I have learned. We always run out of time when we do an in-class discussion. And at first I took it as a bad thing. And with times I changed my mind and I realized that actually it was a good thing, because students are leaving the classroom still thinking about it, say, oh, there was more to it than what I thought we would have. So timing is extremely important when you do in-class discussions. And so what I have done is create my lesson plan. And the first class I shared with you is 75 minutes. The second class is 50 minutes. And I found it's easier to go with the 75 minutes class than the 50-minute class, because yes, it does take times to really engage students in classroom. But having a lesson plan where you actually share with the student, the first 5 minutes, we will do this. The next 15 minutes, we will do that. The third step of the class will be this third type of activity. Really helps students to realize that timing is important, and we need to be doing what we're supposed to be doing at this particular moment, because something else is going to happen in 5 minutes. So timing is very important. And yes, I do this systematically, from the very beginning of the semester to the very end of the semester. I found it very difficult to do a mixture of PowerPoint lecture and discussion, because you fall back so quickly into the lecture mode. Tell students what they need to know, and they want you to tell them what they need to know, as opposed to letting them discover for themselves. So now to the second part, yes, indeed, my classes are small to medium size, 25, 30 student, 40 student is what I can handle with what I described to you. But I know that I have colleagues that are really involved in trying to build on that experiential learning in the classroom with large lecture courses. The think, pair, and share, which is the first type of discussion that I shared with you, can be done regardless of the size of the class. Obviously, it creates a lot of, the way the seats are set up, if the student can, get in small group or not. you know, most of our classroom are rows of students sitting next to one another. So there are very severe limitations with large enrollment courses, but it's not impossible. And I'm not the one who's done those, but I know that you can. Maybe I can try to find some of my colleagues and share some of the tips, if you will, and experience that we've had trying to use that in-class discussion in large enrollment course. It's happening.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, maybe I think we will need probably a follow-up on this webinar also, and especially that a question that arose like a lot in this discussion is the current situation and the COVID-19. So I think that's a question for everyone.
Yes.
Also from question from Jeff from Zamorano, like they moved many of their modules to online, but the hands-on experience, even the learning by doing, you could move maybe to online, but how would you do with the hands-on experience with situations such as the current times, the COVID-19, for example? So I don't know if we have thoughts. I mean, we have thought about having a whole webinar about this topic, but maybe you can say a few words, or anyone else if would like to say any words about this. You're muted, Michelle.
Okay.
We couldn't hear you very well, actually. So maybe I could repeat the question because your voice was just breaking.
Sorry, I was asking about the COVID-19 situation and the experiential learning, like how do we do the hands-on experience with the COVID-19 situation?
And I will answer this very quickly. Again, it's one of my colleagues I know was one of the few instructor here at the university who was allowed to come to his lab, and he actually perform the lab hands-on part, video recording himself, doing it and explaining it, and then posting it online. I don't have any other. I'm sharing with you what I know one of my colleagues did when he was confronted with COVID-19 and everybody had to go home and he had to continue teach a lab-based course. That's what he did.
Anyone else would like to say any word about this? I think we're running over time a bit, so it's already 90 minutes, but I guess there are too many questions. So if you don't mind, we can stay a few more minutes and try to answer more questions. Okay, Daniel, and maybe everyone also. Another question coming from Zamorano, who says that they really engage and enjoy the experiential learning, and especially the learning by doing modules. But the tough part of their programs is the learning of the basic sciences and math and science, basic science and math. So are there any proven methods on how to integrate experiential learning in classes focused on the basic sciences and math, maybe? Any ideas?
Well, I think that that Michelle presented a number of techniques that can be adapted to, a class on mathematics. The students, some of the techniques, the share among students, particularly the emphasis on pre-reading and preparation before class, as opposed to trying to teach whatever it is, calculus or something in the classroom itself. Use the class time to have students help each other, have the professor, who is obviously the content expert, help students work through the problems, but don't so many of those sorts of basic science, math, technical courses tend to be just, endless lecturing with the professor doing, the work on the board, and the student expected again under the banking system of just remembering it all and regurgitating the exam is not probably the most effective way. But I would encourage some or others who have some.
I think, I'm originally a science teacher, so I taught chemistry. And I always had, taught chemistry content through activities. It has, you need to do a lot of planning but you can involve the students in very well selected activities that will, sometimes I call them discrepant activities, that will really create some equilibrium. And then the solution would be really based on content. And therefore the ultimate purpose is teaching content, however, through activities. I think the problem is that we have this notion that students have to know content and then come apply activity. And that's, I think, the basic assumption of experiential learning, is that it's not correct. You know, you can design activities so that you can learn contact from them. I have experience in secondary school teaching chemistry this way, and in my teaching of science teachers, I do it a lot. So I think, but it requires that your lesson planning are very carefully designed.
Thank you, Professor Salma. This is good. I guess it answers a little bit the question. It's a challenge in many courses, but there we can always find a way. A question to Frank. So participants think that rural cafe is a genius idea. So one of the question is, how do you determine who to invite to this rural cafe?
That's a good question, but what I've done is I've had a lot of contacts over the years. And so lots of times these are people, some of them are former students who are now farmers. And some of them are people who I could contact through the commodities. We've never ever had a farmer turn us down. So some of these are people who are current farmers. We've had people who are 80 years old who were dairy farmers for their life, and they came and engaged with the students just as well. So this hasn't been a problem.
Okay, thank you. Martina, you have more questions for our speakers?
Yes, there is one actually related to problem solving. So one participant commented that problem solving is a very important part of a learning process for adults, which includes also farmers. And most of these problems that are experienced are very complex. So how do we explain to students, or how do we teach them about problem solving process? And what role should an agriculture advisor play at each stage of that problem solving? So this is a question that any speaker can answer.
So, I'll jump in with a brief answer. Actually, if as participant to this webinar, if you really think about experiential learning and the steps and the phases of experiential learning, it's all about problem solving. This is how we learn, by identifying, getting motivated, find a good reason why something needs to be different, make a model of the way the world is now, make prediction and hypotheses, and predict what would be different if there is a cause that creates an effect, and then go and try it and experiment with it. So the process of experiential learning is the process of problem solving.
Thank you, Michelle.
Can I say something, Rula?
Go ahead.
I think it has to be gradual. You cannot start teaching somebody to use experiential learning just the moment they get into the first year of college. I think this is a continuous process that takes a lot of time, but because it required a lot of skills. So probably it has to have some preparation for the students, and then slowly but carefully design activities and lessons through experiential learning. It would have been really excellent if there is a relationship between secondary school teaching and universities, where the secondary schools also do that. But at least in our situation in Beirut at the American University, I think when we get students, for example, from the international baccalaureate, it's very easy for us to get them involved in thinking activities and hands-on and thinking activities, because they've done it in high school. So it has to be done gradually but surely, with a lot of planning.
Thank you, Dr. Boujoude. A question from our friend John Kennelly. How do we equip our young professors with the skill sets to be effective facilitators of experiential learning?
Can I say that something quickly? Attend workshops in CTLs.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
because you know the idea is that people, faculty members, think that just by having the content matter, they can become good teachers. You know, look at the experience of Dr. Michel. You know, he's developed his own method of doing it. But I think we can expedite the process by providing those faculty members with tools to do that. You know, in many countries in the world, a high school teacher cannot go to the classroom without getting some preparation. However, at the university, the assumption is that you get a PhD and then you have to become an excellent teacher. I think this is something that needs to be thought about very carefully if we want to focus on student learning.
just to add, the CTL is the Center of Teaching and Learning at AUB.
Many
And I'm
universities.
assuming, yeah, I'm assuming most of the universities, they have such centers that can also help professors. Any other thoughts about how to equip the professors with the experience skills to be facilitators?
I'll jump in very quickly with a brief comment, and it's again just my context, my experience here at the University of Wisconsin. We're a very research-oriented universities, and I will, you know, it's a cheap shot, as we say in English, but I will take an aim at our administrators who are not emphasizing enough that the real function of higher education is creating the next generation of leaders. And unfortunately, they look more at publications, dollars, or research funding that you bring into the university, as opposed to looking at molding the mind of the next generation of the leaders in the agricultural world. And that's such a tall order, and we hardly ever talk about it as administrators. And I think our administrators need to be a lot more forthcoming with this as a fundamental mission of our universities.
I would just add that I think you have to really try and convert grad students when they're grad students. So we have programs at our university that grad students can learn how to teach, and we pair them up with faculty. And I think they sort of see the light and it becomes part of who they are. And it's just kind of like conversion, I think.
Agreed.
This is exactly what we're doing at AUB. You know, all PhD students have to take a number of courses, but they also practice with faculty members so that they get some experience.
Okay, thank you. I think we're running over time a lot, so I will just ask two last questions. So the first one is the aim of experiential learning process to prepare students to become entrepreneurs in the future rather than becoming the others, like the researchers? Is this the main aim of the experiential learning? Not to become researcher, but rather become an entrepreneur?
I think you just want them to take control of their own learning and set themselves up for a lifetime of learning. That's what I try and do, is give them the skills to ask the question, learn how to answer the question, and so they're set up for life. Maybe it's overly simplistic, but that's what I believe.
And my short answer is complement very well. And it's the idea that the ultimate goal for me is to literally create engaged citizen. That's the two words that I use. And what I mean by that is having people who are in charge of their own life, as opposed to become fatalistic in things that they cannot change the world. It's empowering them to realize that they have agency. They can contribute to changing the world. Not the whole world, but some of it.
But also a good researcher is a good problem solver. If they can solve problems, I think it will help them research as well.
That's true. Okay, the last question, I will actually address it to Jim. Jim is our project director, and also he's the He is with Getchera. So the question is, how do we proceed further from here to build a network of institutions, to have consortium, for example, of experiential learning centers, or for global students visits, for example, or and to also get benefit from all the experiences in such centers? Like, is this something we could move to, like maybe a whole network for experiential learning?
Thank you, Rula, and I want to give my thanks to all the participants on this incredible webinar. I think it's been very well attended and very well thought through, and people have been really taking advantage of this. This is a very important question, very interesting question. I think through the project, we are very interested in, of course, promoting experiential learning among the Getchera network of associations and university members, as well as with our pilot universities. And therefore, we have been talking about developing tools, communication tools that would enhance networking around these different themes that we are talking about. And in this particular case, experiential learning. We have already set up as a test an experiential learning Facebook group as part of the project, and we will be going live with that hopefully in the not too distant future. And of course, we will invite all of the participants in this webinar to become members of that network itself. I think that would be a good way to enhance dialogue around the different themes that are coming out as part of this discussion here. Of course, we can work with Salma and identify other centers of learning that are specifically designed to help professors and the faculty within their own organizations, and maybe even discuss the possibility of creating a network among these centers around the theme of experiential learning. And this is something that we can talk about more with our team at the American University of Beirut. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I guess now it's time to wrap up and close the webinar. We already exceeded the time limit. There are too many questions that we could not address, but I think it's worth maybe doing a follow-up session also. You will have a after webinar survey, and maybe if you are interested also, please mention this in the survey. So I think today we heard really 4 interesting presentations, and that inspired all of us on how to integrate more experiential learning into our classrooms. So before you leave this webinar, please, if you have any topics that you'd like to, or you're interested in, and you want to talk about, you can type it in the chat box, especially about the 5 key elements of success: the experiential learning, the community engagement, the social entrepreneurship, ethical value-based leadership, and the conflict resolution through dialogue. We've really enjoyed the active participation from the audience, and the too many questions and the contributions and comments we've received through the chat box. I hope this webinar inspired all of you to start thinking about what actions you can take to deliver more experiential learning to your students and how to get more involved. We were recording this webinar, and we will make it available on our website along with the presentations. Also, I would like finally to thank our speakers today, Professors Boujoude, Sherrard, Watio, and Robinson, for their valuable inputs to the webinar. And of course, I would like to thank Martina for her help with this preparation of this webinar and the moderation. I would also like to thank the AUB IT team for their technical support today. Please share your feedback about this webinar with us using the survey, and also maybe encourage your colleagues to watch the video of this webinar in case they missed it. Well, thank you everyone, and have a good day or a good evening, depending where you are in the world. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.